There is a silent, invisible threshold that separates those who merely learn from those who truly master. It is a filter, a great filter. And today, you are going to discover exactly why most people never get past the beginner level in anything they attempt in life. Think about the last time you tried to learn something. Maybe it was a language. Maybe it was trading. Maybe it was coding. You started with excitement, you bought the course, you watched the tutorials, but 3 months later, where were you? Stuck in the valley of despair, frustrated, still making the same mistakes, still feeling like an outsider looking in. You have probably said this yourself. It is the perfect excuse to stop trying. I don't have the genetics, so it's impossible for me. That is the single biggest lie you can tell yourself. Do you know what the people who master things in record time actually have in common? It's not IQ. It's not genetics. It is a framework that you were never taught in school, never taught at university, and certainly never taught in a $10 online course. If you read the history books, they're described as these mythical super soldiers, 10,000 men who moved as a single organism. They were the most terrifying force of the ancient world because their archery was so precise, it felt mechanical. But if you actually look at who these men were, the myth falls apart. They weren't born warriors, they weren't genetic freaks. Most of them started as illiterate farmers and shepherds who had never held a bow in their lives. So how do you take a confused farmer and turn him into a lethal weapon? You don't do it with talent. You don't do it by telling him to be creative or find his own style. You do it with a training system so rigid, so repetitive, and so boring that it forces the brain to physically change. The Persians didn't have a word for neuroplasticity, but they understood the mechanism. They knew that if you restrict a human being's choices, if you force them to do the exact same motion, the exact same way 10,000 times, the brain stops thinking and starts automating. Centuries later, the Japanese codified this process. They called it shuhari. It's not a philosophy, it's just the physics of learning. It is the only bridge that exists between I'm trying this out and I own this. When you actually respect this law, you stop being the person who has a closet full of half-finished projects. You stop being the guy who learns Python for 2 weeks, gets hard, switches to drop shipping, gets bored, and switches to day trading. You stop collecting beginner gains, and you finally start breaking through to the elite level. But it comes at a price. Learning this system will require you to accept a truth that your ego will absolutely hate to hear. Before I hand you the map to this system, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and like the video below. And tell me in the comments, what is the one skill you have tried to learn but failed? Coding? Trading? A new language? Be honest. Now, back to the truth. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Aimed Too Hard. The story I am about to tell you took place in the dusty plains of Persia, hundreds of years ago. A young man named Kayel had a dream that consumed his every waking thought. He wanted to join the Royal Guard archers. He wasn't born into a military family. He had no status, no name, nothing but an obsession that burned in his chest like a fever. While other village boys accepted their fate as merchants or farmers, Kayel spent hours hiding in the bushes, watching the Royal Guard train. He watched the way they stood, the terrifying stillness of their hands, the way the arrow seemed to leave the bow before they even decided to release it. He wanted that power more than he wanted to breathe. At 16, Kyle decided waiting for a miracle was pointless. He found a young ash tree on the edge of the valley and spent 3 days cutting, shaping, and sanding until he had something that looked close enough to a bow. It wasn't elegant, the grip was uneven, and the curve wasn't perfectly smooth, but it was his. He held it the way he'd seen the guards hold theirs, trying to imagine what it felt like to stand among them instead of in the dust above their training grounds. He began to practice in a dry field behind his family's hut, a place no one cared about except the goats. He woke when the sky was still a cold shade of blue and slipped outside before his father stirred. Then he worked through the movements he had memorized: pull, breathe, anchor, release, over and over until the rhythm blurred into something almost meditative. He stayed at it long after the sun came up. He stayed at it until his arms shook, until his fingertips grew raw, until the string cut thin lines across his skin. Some days he shot until he could barely curl his fingers. He wrapped them in cloth and kept going anyway. The cloth soaked through, and he kept going after that too. 6 months passed like this. He expected that one morning he would wake to find the motion had finally settled into his body. But nothing changed. His movements still felt stiff, like he was imitating something he didn't fully understand. His arrows drifted in every direction except the one he wanted. The bow never felt alive in his hands. It always felt like what it really was, a branch he had forced into a shape it didn't want to hold. The harder he pushed himself, the worse it seemed to get. Each miss stung more than the last. Each morning felt heavier. Some days he lowered the bow and just stared at it, wondering if he had misunderstood everything he had watched on that ridge, wondering if he was chasing a thing meant for other people. Not him. Never him. But he couldn't stop. The frustration burned, but the dream burned hotter. He tried to hack the process, though he wouldn't have used that word. He just knew something wasn't working and wanted to outthink whatever stood in his way. He hunted down old scrolls from a traveling scribe and pestered an elderly potter who claimed he once served in a border militia. He read about wind patterns in the mountain passes. He memorized the names and shapes of different arrowheads as if reciting them would grant them their secrets. He studied how tension worked in a bowstring, how wood bent, how force traveled through the limbs. He filled his head with more knowledge than anyone in his village would ever need, but the moment he picked up his ash bow, all of it slipped away. His hands didn't care what he knew. The bow didn't care either. His shots flew off in strange directions as if the air itself was mocking him. He would close his eyes and try to imagine the posture of the immortals, the smoothness of their release, but the picture broke apart the instant he tried to recreate it. A full year passed like this. A long, grinding year of small hopes rising in the morning and collapsing by sunset. By the end of it, Kael looked like a young man worn down by a dream too big for his frame. His bow was chipped, his fingers were scarred, and despite all the stubborn discipline he had poured into his practice, he remained exactly what he'd been on the day he started. A village boy standing in a field with a crooked homemade bow. The dream that once kept him awake at night now hung around his neck like a weight. He began to wonder if he had mistaken determination for destiny. If wanting something badly enough wasn't enough. He didn't know it yet, but he was one morning away from the moment everything would shift. One moment, one breath, one choice that would pull him out of anonymity and set him on a path he couldn't have imagined.
Chapter 2. The Meeting. One afternoon, Kael was practicing near the edge of the canyon, cursing as his arrows flew wide. Suddenly, a voice drifted from the shadows. Your feet are loud. Your shoulder is high. Your breath is shallow. Everything you are doing is useless. Kael spun around. Standing there was an old man, blind in one eye, leaning on a staff. He looked like a beggar, but he held himself like a king. Kael felt the shame burn his face. I am trying to learn on my own, old man. I have no teacher. The old man walked around him, sniffing the air. How long have you been practicing? 1 year, Kael said proudly. And are you any better than when you started? Silence. The answer was obvious. The old man walked up to Kael and snatched the bow from his hands. You know what your problem is, boy. You think you are training, but what you are actually doing is cementing your mistakes. Every time you miss, you are teaching your muscles how to miss perfectly. You are practicing failure. Those words cut deeper than any knife. Kyle had spent a whole year getting worse.
Sir, Kyle whispered, his voice trembling, I am trying to learn on my own. How do I do it right then? I have studied the scrolls. I know the theory. That is exactly your problem, the old man interrupted. You are trying to build the roof before you have poured the foundation. You are trying to be creative before you have learned to be obedient. You skipped the only thing that matters. The old man looked Kyle in the eye. There is a path to mastery that has 3 gates. You must walk through each one. You cannot skip. You cannot run. If you try to rush, you will spend your entire life being mediocre at everything you touch. What path? Kyle asked. Shuhari, the old man replied. Shu, obey. Ha, detach. Ri, transcend. 3 stages, 1 destination, true mastery. Kyle was desperate. Please, teach me. The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Meet me here at dawn, and prepare yourself, because the first stage will destroy everything you think you know about learning.
That night, Kale can barely sleep. He walks home with a lightness he hasn't felt in years. His steps are fast. His mind races. For the first time, the path ahead feels real. Not a dream, not a story he tells himself. A direction. At dawn, Kale returns before the sun clears the mountains. The master is already there. Before I teach you, the master says, you must understand the path. There are 3 stages, Shu, Ha, Ri. Most people never get past the first. Many fail at the second. Almost none reach the third. He pauses, then draws a line in the sand. We begin with Shu. Chapter 4. Shu. In the Shu stage, you become a perfect copy of me, the master explains. You do exactly what I do. You walk where I walk, you strike when I strike. Kale listens closely. This is necessary, the master continues. Without this stage, you break yourself before you ever learn control. But if you stop here, you never become a true warrior. You remain only my shadow. You move because I move. You think because I think. The old master draws a circle in the sand. Shu is this circle. These are the limits I place on you to keep you safe. Inside it, every rule is clear. Every response is already tested. You do not need to understand why something works. You only need to trust it and repeat it until it lives in your body. He taps the edge of the circle with his staff. But a shadow cannot fight on its own. When the light shifts, it disappears. When the ground changes, it does not know where to stand. A warrior needs more than forms. He needs judgment. The master meets Kale's eyes. Shu teaches obedience and discipline. It protects you. But as you keep moving within the circle, it becomes too small. If you stay inside it, the world defeats you, because the world does not respect my rules. Chapter 5. Ha, the dangerous deliverance. Now comes Ha, the master says, erasing part of the circle with his foot. But be careful, the master says. Most people confuse Ha with arrogance. They break the rules not because they have mastered them, but because they are bored. That afternoon, the master sends Kale away, down from the silent mountain, out to the stormy coast, to train with a mercenary band known as the Storm Riders. For the next year, Kale lives inside chaos. The riders do everything wrong. The master teaches stillness. The riders teach constant motion. The master teaches silence. The riders shout and laugh. The master teaches patience. The riders teach speed without hesitation. Kale doubts himself. If I learn this messy style, won't it ruin everything I worked so hard to build? At first, his body fights itself. He tries to stay still while the horse moves, and he falls. He tries slow breathing while arrows rain down, and he gets hit. Shu fails him in the real world. Then, slowly, something shifts. Kale begins to notice what stays the same beneath the noise. Not the forms, not the styles. The principle. Energy moves through the body. The master teaches it through stillness. The riders teach it through momentum. Different paths, same truth. When Kale returns to visit the master, the old man nods. He says, Shu teaches you the text. Ha teaches you the subtext. When you understand the principle, the technique becomes a tool, not a cage. One morning, Kale blocks an attack with the master's patience and counters with the rider's speed. The movement feels effortless. Only afterwards does he realize what happened. He didn't choose a style, he created one. This is Ha, the stage where you combine, adapt, and modify. The musician who studies theory so he knows how to break it. The coder who follows best practices so he knows when to ignore them. But Kale still thinks, now I use this, now I use that. He is skilled, dangerous, but not free. One gate remains. Chapter 6, Ri, the silent transcendence. Ri is the stage where technique disappears. You do not use the skill uses you. Kale frowns. How can I shoot without technique? You will understand when you stop trying to understand. The master stops teaching. No corrections, no explanations, only impossible situations. Shooting in darkness, shooting by sound, shooting exhausted. The goal is simple. Overwhelm the thinking mind until it lets go. When masters reach this level, the part of the brain that decides goes quiet. The body stops waiting for instruction. Action emerges on its own. Years later, a proud prince challenges Kale. I know 50 styles of archery, the prince boasts. Which one will you use? Kale stands calmly. His bow is not even raised. I don't know, he says. The prince laughs and draws. In less than a breath, Kale moves. No stance, no technique, no thought. The arrow is already there. It pins the bows to the ground before the string can be pulled. What technique was that? The prince gasps. Kale helps him to his feet. It wasn't a technique. It was just the answer. This is Ri. You no longer imitate. You no longer adapt. You respond. The map is gone. You are the territory. And here's the part most people miss. You cannot jump to this stage. Anyone who tries skips the work and stays stuck forever. Because mastery isn't magic. It isn't instant. It comes from the long, quiet work no one sees. From repetition, from discipline, from having the patience to move through Shu and Ha before you even reach Ri. Kale's story is not really about archery. It's about you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people today never reach Ri, or even Ha, because they refuse to surrender to Shu. We live in hack culture. Everyone wants the shortcut, the top 5 tricks, the secret method, the passive income hack. The shortcut that skips the boring part, identity without apprenticeship. You say, I don't like following rules. I want to be creative. Most of the time, that isn't creativity. It's ego protecting you from the work. You don't actually want your own path yet. You want to avoid the boredom of mastering someone else's. If Kale had refused to stand still and breathe for 6 months, he wouldn't be a master. He would be a village boy with a half-formed skill and a broken dream. So here's your protocol. Not tomorrow, now. Step 1. Choose one skill. Not a bundle of goals, not something you rotate when you get bored. One skill that matters enough for you to stick with it even when it stops being fun. Step 2. Find someone far ahead of you. A real master if possible, or a system built by someone who clearly knows what they're doing. Someone whose level makes you a little uncomfortable. That discomfort matters. Step 3. Enter Shu. Copy them. closely. Follow the structure exactly as it's given to you. Don't adjust it to your taste. Don't try to improve it early. Treat it like learning a new language, where your only job is to repeat the sounds correctly. Step 4. Wait. Only when the fundamentals run on their own, only when you no longer have to think about them, do you earn the right to bend the rules. Before that, experimentation isn't growth. It's guessing. This path is old. It isn't exciting. It doesn't make for flashy clips. It works because it forces you to build something that doesn't collapse under pressure. The path is ancient, the path is boring, and the path works. The real question isn't whether Shuhari works, it's whether you have the humility to walk it. If you commit to Shu fully, there will come a time, years from now, when you look back and barely recognize who you used to be. Your habits, your limits, the fears that quietly controlled your decisions, they'll feel like they belonged to someone else. Shuhari isn't glamorous. It's slow, repetitive, and sometimes frustrating, but it reshapes you in ways nothing else can. It breaks you down and rebuilds you with steadier hands and a clearer mind. And that's why every true master starts there. Keep walking your path wherever you are on it. I'll see you in the next video.